I still remember the heat that afternoon, not the ordinary warmth of a coastal summer, but the kind that presses into your bones, the kind that makes every sound vibrate twice. Even now, so many years later, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the cicadas buzzing in the oak trees like 1,000 tiny machines working overtime. And right in the middle of that thick heat, in the middle of my vacation, came the message that would shift the ground under my feet. It was from my son, Rowan. "Mom, we know this is your beach house, but Myra's parents want privacy with us this week. Could you move to a hotel? We'll pay for the room." I stood in my own kitchen when that text arrived, the kitchen I designed myself back when every dollar I saved felt like a brick laid for my future. The room was sunlit, filled with the scent of cut watermelon and mint, and still I felt cold. Not angry, not yet just cold, the kind of cold that forms when something in you realizes before the rest of you accepts it that a fracture has formed. I typed back one word, "All right." At the time, even I didn't know what that "all right" truly meant. But before I ever stepped out that door, before the dominoes began to fall, you need to understand what the house meant to me. The place wasn't just a vacation home. It was a monument to the years when no one helped me, when no one saw me. I had been a young architect then, stubborn, determined, and impossibly optimistic. Every corner of that house bore the mark of my hands, the arch of the terrace, the sun-facing windows, the stonework, the blooming jasmine that I planted the year Rowan graduated high school. And yet, for the first time since I built it, I felt like an intruder in it. On the terrace that day sat 4 people who barely acknowledged my existence. Rowan, my son, eyes glued to his plate. Myra, my daughter-in-law, smiling like a queen surveying land she didn't own. And her parents, Caspian and Lorelei Darnell, who walked into my home as if they were doing me a favor simply by breathing in it. Caspian wore a permanent frown, the kind belonging to a man convinced the world owes him gratitude for simply occupying space. Lorelei, dripping in oversized jewelry, kept commenting on every detail with that tone rich people use when pretending not to look down on something. Charming. For an older home, she kept saying, although she couldn't hide her disdain. They sat there discussing my house, knocking down walls, replacing my garden with slick concrete, modernizing the outdated charm, as if I were nothing more than the maid who accidentally lingered too long. And Rowan, my sweet boy who used to run barefoot through this very yard, couldn't meet my eyes. When Myra snapped her fingers at me, literally snapped her fingers, asking for more wine and colder ice, the sting was sharp. But the truth, the deeper sting came from realizing Rowan let her. That day, I felt something unravel inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a thread you don't notice until half the seam has already come undone. I told them I was going to the market. I didn't say it to spite them. I said it because otherwise, I might have said something else, something final, something irreversible. I stepped outside my gate and walked toward town, letting the sun burn away the fog in my mind. But I didn't know then that the real firestorm was only an hour away. And the message waiting for me at the market, that was the moment everything in my life shifted. What did Rowan text me at the market? And why did that single message end every illusion I still held about my family? The market by the shore was usually my refuge. Even in the worst of seasons, it felt alive, the chatter of vendors, the scent of citrus and smoked fish, the mingled aromas of rosemary, sun, and sea breeze. If any place could clear the film of humiliation from my skin, it was that market. I moved slowly along the stalls, forcing myself to focus on the figs, dark, soft, ripened under the relentless summer sun. I picked each one the way I had always picked fruit for Rowan when he was young, pressing lightly with my thumb to check for just the right give. It's funny how motherhood lingers in the fingertips even when the heart grows tired. And then my phone buzzed. I remember the moment with uncomfortable clarity, the fig in my hand, warm from sitting in the sun, and the vibration against my palm sending a jolt up my arm. For a second, I allowed myself to believe it could be an apology. Rowan had always been a sensitive boy, the kind to crumble after hurting someone's feelings. Maybe I thought foolishly he saw Myra snap at me. Maybe he felt shame. Maybe he finally looked up from his plate long enough to remember who raised him. But when I unlocked my phone, the world around me dimmed, silenced, and folded into one line of text. "Mom, Myra's parents are uncomfortable with you staying at the house. They want privacy. Please move to a hotel until they leave. We'll cover the cost." Hope you understand. I stood frozen with my basket of figs. People brushed past me, a fisherman shouted prices nearby, a child tugged on her mother's sleeve asking for candy, but none of it registered. It wasn't the request itself, it was the phrasing. "They are uncomfortable with you staying here. They want privacy. And worst of all, hope you understand." My house, the home I designed, funded, built, and maintained alone, reduced to a temporary lodging where I was an inconvenience. All the years I spent believing that Rowan, despite marrying into a wealthy family, still valued me, they cracked right then. The cracks had been growing for a while, I see that now, but this message was the one that split the structure down the center. And what surprised me most wasn't sadness. It was clarity. A sharp, cold clarity that sliced through every emotion trying to surge forward. I didn't feel like a mother reading that message. I felt like an architect again, assessing structural failure. Rowan wasn't being cruel. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That would have required intention. No, he was being weak. And weakness, when paired with the wrong people, becomes something far more dangerous than cruelty. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, an entire novel of overdue truths formed in my mind, every disappointment, every time I covered for him, every quiet sacrifice he never knew about. Instead, I typed a single word. Understood. Because I did understand. Finally, fully, I understood that I had raised a man who didn't know how to protect what loved him. I understood that Myra had carved out a place of power in his life and he had allowed it. I understood that her parents saw me as a relic to be removed, not respected. But most importantly, I understood something about myself. I was done being pushed aside. I wasn't going to cry in that market. I wasn't going to shake with anger. I wasn't going to run back home to pack. No, I was going to do something entirely different, something none of them expected. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't touched in years, a man who dealt in beachfront property, quick closings, and quiet transactions. And when he answered, I said the sentence that began the end. Calder, I'm selling my house. Today. What happened when I walked into Calder's office? And how did one impulsive decision turn into the boldest move of my life? Calder's office sat right on the waterfront, all glass and steel, as if someone had dropped a modern aquarium in the middle of our sleepy coastal town. I walked there with the figs still in my bag, though I don't know why I carried them. Habit maybe, or maybe that last thread of who I used to be hadn't snapped yet. The office door chimed softly when I entered, and the blast of cold air conditioning met me like a slap. There was the faint smell of cedar polish and espresso, a combination I always associated with expensive decisions. Calder looked up from his desk when he saw me. He had aged since I last worked with him, broader, grayer, with a sharper business edge in his eyes. But the grin he gave me was the same mischievous one he used to flash when bending county zoning rules on my behalf. Well, if it is Lyra Hale, he said, standing and adjusting his blazer. Haven't seen you since, goodness, before the pandemic. What brings the Queen of Indigo Bluff into my den? I didn't answer right away. I just placed my phone on his desk, screen still showing Rowan's message. Calder read it silently. His eyebrows rose, he nodded once. And then he looked at me with an expression I've only seen on seasoned surgeons when they realize the patient isn't there for consultation but for amputation. You're selling, he said. It wasn't a question. Today, I replied. Calder sank into his chair, folding his hands across his stomach. Lyra, listen, I've handled a lot of impulsive sales in my career, emotional divorces, inheritance fights, business collapses, but you, he squinted. You're too calm, I shrugged. Calmness is what happens when you've finally stopped hoping someone will treat you better. He exhaled long and low. All right, he said, leaning forward. You want fast. Fast is complicated, legally messy, often lowball. Are you prepared for that? I shook my head. I want fast and full value. Calder blinked, then blinked again. You're serious. As a cornerstone, I answered. He drummed his fingers on the desk. The only person who buys property at full price in a matter of hours is someone who doesn't care about money or someone who hates waiting. I know exactly one man who fits both categories. A slow, knowing smile crept onto his face. Orion Cross. The name hovered between us like a spark. Orion wasn't a local. He was a developer based 2 states north, infamous for 3 things: his ruthlessness, his impatience, his irrational obsession with coastal real estate. Calder picked up the phone and dialed. Orion answered on the first ring. Cross. Orion, it's Calder. Remember that bluff-top property with the wraparound terrace? The one you said you'd buy sight unseen if the owner ever changed her mind. A pause, then, you're joking, she's selling. Yes, and she wants immediate possession transfer. Another pause, shorter, sharper. 40 minutes, I'll be there. Calder hung up and turned to me. Well, you just set fire to the map of your old life, no turning back now. I picked up the figs from my bag, one by one, and tossed them into the office trash can. No, I said. I burned those bridges the moment I replied understood. What happened when Orion Cross arrived at my home, and why did I need him to play along with a deception that would shatter my in-laws' arrogance? By the time Calder drove me back toward Indigo Bluff, I had fully stepped out of the version of myself that tolerated quiet disrespect. It was astonishing how quickly a person can transform when they realize the door they've been knocking on for years will never open. I wasn't returning as a hostess. I wasn't returning as Rowan's mother. I wasn't returning as the woman Myra treated like unpaid domestic help. I was returning as the owner. And Orion Cross was arriving as the storm. Calder's car pulled up right behind a matte black SUV the size of a small ship. In front of my gate stood Orion, tall, broad-shouldered, impatiently tapping his phone against his palm. He looked like a man who had never in his life been told no. Not by bankers, not by builders, not by fate itself. He glanced at me as I stepped out of the car. "You're Hale?" he asked, voice deep enough to vibrate the hinges of the gate. "I am. Calder said you were selling. He didn't say you were imposing." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that meant to be a compliment?" "Depends," he said, slipping his sunglasses onto his head. "Do you like compliments with teeth?" I didn't answer. Instead, I unlocked the gate. As we walked down the stone path toward the terrace, I could already hear laughter, Myra's high-pitched cackle echoing like something metallic. They were drinking my wine, eating my food, lounging in my chairs as though they had conquered the place. Orion must have sensed the shift in my posture because he leaned in slightly and murmured, "Before we go in, tell me what you need from me." I turned to face him fully. "I need you to act," I said. "Not like a buyer, like the new owner, one who doesn't negotiate with squatters." His expression brightened in a way I hadn't expected. "You want theatrics," he said with a grin. "I like theatrics." "They don't know I'm selling," I explained. "They believe they have a right to this house." Orion laughed, a low, rumbling sound. "You want me to be the blunt instrument." "Exactly." He cracked his knuckles. "It would be my pleasure." We rounded the corner to the terrace. The moment the sliding doors opened, the chatter died. The stillness that fell over the table was almost comical, the exact silence you hear when animals in the wild sense something larger than them entering the clearing. Rowan's glass froze halfway to his lips. Myra's smile dropped as if someone slapped it off her face. Caspian and Lorelei stared, confused and insulted. Myra recovered first, stepping forward with that brittle smile she only wore when she wanted to make someone disappear. "Lyra," she said sweetly, "if you're back for your suitcase, we put it by the stairs for you. The hotel deposit was sent. You can leave any time." Orion stepped forward before I could speak. "Why would the owner leave?" he boomed. "When I haven't finished the walk through." Myra blinked. Rowan choked. Caspian snorted in disbelief. "Walk through? What walk through? This is our home." "No," Orion said, taking off his sunglasses with slow theatrical flair. "It's mine." The words hit the terrace like a crack of lightning. Myra turned pale. Rowan's fork clattered onto his plate. Lorelei grabbed her husband's arm. And I just stood there, calm, composed, scarf fluttering in the breeze, watching the first fault lines split across the surface of their entitled certainty, because they didn't know yet. They didn't understand yet. But I was about to turn their perfect little world inside out. How did they react when I revealed the truth about who owned the house? And why did my daughter-in-law's lies begin unraveling faster than she could stitch new ones? I wish I had recorded their faces in that moment. It would have been a masterpiece of human expression. Shock first, then indignation, then disbelief, each emotion tripping over the next like poorly rehearsed dancers. Myra was the first to recover. She always prided herself on controlling a room, though I had long suspected the room never realized it was supposed to be controlled. She stepped toward me, her heels clicking sharply across the tile. "Lyra," she said slowly, as though speaking to a confused child, "this house is my home. Rowan and I bought it 3 years ago. Remember? You insisted on staying after the storm because you didn't want to deal with your old condo." Her confidence was impressive, considering that every lie she told was built on a rotten foundation. Before I could respond, Orion stepped forward with a casual stretch of his shoulders, the kind predators make before pouncing. "Interesting," he said, "because the deed I saw this afternoon lists only one owner and it isn't you." Myra's smile twitched, but she held it in place with sheer force. "Maybe you misunderstood. She didn't buy it," I cut in gently. "She didn't pay for it. She didn't renovate it. She didn't even plant that herb garden she loves to brag about." Rowan's head snapped up. His entire face drained of color. "Mom," he whispered. What are you saying?" I walked to the table and laid a thick envelope on the polished wood. "That I built this house 21 years ago," I said. "That I owned it outright from the moment the final stone was laid. And that I never, not once, asked your wife or her parents for a dime toward it." Caspian snatched the envelope before his daughter could stop him. He flipped through the documents, title history, construction permits, contractor receipts. His eyes narrowed more with each page. "How is this possible?" he growled, turning to Myra. "You told us you and Rowan purchased it yourselves. You said you were drowning in mortgage payments." "And you cried," Lorelei added, voice trembling. "You cried about being burdened. We sent money every month to help." Rowan's head shot toward his wife. "Money. What money?" That was the moment the mask finally cracked. Myra's face contorted, not with guilt but with panic, real raw panic. The kind a person feels when they realize the stage floor beneath them is collapsing. I didn't lie," she stammered. "We did have expenses. I told them the truth, just not all of it. Renovations, upgrades, you know how much work this place needed." I chuckled. I couldn't help it. "This house," I said, sweeping my hand toward the plaster, stone, and handcrafted woodwork, "hasn't needed a renovation since you set foot in it. That plaster, I installed it myself. Those tiles, imported and paid for a decade before you two married. The windows, updated 5 years before you even graduated." "Stop," Myra hissed. "You're making me look like a liar," Orion supplied, leaning against the railing with a wolfish grin. "No need for her help. You're doing a thorough job yourself." Lorelei sank into her chair, pressing her hand to her forehead. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Caspian, how much did we send her?" Caspian clenched his jaw so tightly I could see the muscle twitching. 5,000 a month, he said, each word like a hammer. "For 3 years." Rowan swayed where he stood, grabbing the back of a chair to keep his balance. 15,000 a year, he murmured. "No," I corrected quietly. 180,000. The terrace fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop. Myra tried one last desperate swing. "Fine," she snapped. "So maybe the house isn't mine, but Rowan and I are still family. You can't throw us out." Orion stepped forward, folding his arms. "Look around you," he said. "This isn't your castle. You're a guest who's overstayed, and it's moving out day." And though she didn't know it yet, Myra's day was about to get much, much worse. What did Myra do next? Her most desperate, manipulative move yet, and how did it crumble under one simple truth? If you've ever watched someone drown in their own lies, you'll recognize the look Myra had in her eyes at that moment. Wild, darting, searching for any surface to cling to. Every excuse she normally relied on had been ripped away. Charm, manipulation, faux innocence, theatrics. All useless now. So she did what people like her always do when the truth corners them. She reached for the one card she believed no one would dare challenge. She placed a trembling hand on her stomach. And in a voice soft enough to fool anyone who didn't know better, she whispered, "I'm pregnant." The words were so quiet that for a moment I wondered if I had imagined them. But Rowan heard. His head shot up so fast his neck cracked. His eyes filled with a kind of desperate hope I'd long feared in him, the hope that pain can be erased with magic instead of responsibility. You're pregnant?" he asked, voice trembling. Myra nodded, lower lip quivering for dramatic effect. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she said, squeezing her eyes shut as if overwhelmed by emotion. "But I'm carrying your child, our child, and your mother, your own mother, is trying to turn you against us." Lorelei gasped. Caspian straightened, confusion and anger warring on his face. Even Calder, standing off to the side, muttered something like, "Oh, she's good." Rowan reached for Myra's hands. "Why didn't you say anything?" His voice cracked. "Why now?" "Because," she whispered, "I wanted us all to feel like a family before I shared." Her tears shimmered. "But your mother ruined it. She's always hated me." I stepped forward slowly, deliberately, not angry, just tired. Bone-deep tired of being painted as a villain in a story where all I ever did was love too hard. "Myra," I said softly, "if you're pregnant, why did you drink nearly an entire bottle of sparkling wine this afternoon?" She froze. The entire terrace froze with her. Rowan blinked. What? No, she wasn't drinking. Oh, but she was. I walked to the table and picked up the bottle she had favored, its label an unmistakable vintage. Twice I poured for her myself, and her glass was always empty again within minutes. Myra's eyes darted to the bottle like a mouse tracking a descending hawk. "That was non-alcoholic," she snapped, voice suddenly sharp. "You know I don't drink the expensive stuff you hoard." I raised the bottle, pointing to the clear print. 11.5% alcohol. A vintage I selected years ago. There's not a single non-alcoholic bottle in my cellar. Rowan's breath hitched. "Myra, is that true?" She stepped back. "I only had a sip." "A sip?" Caspian growled. "You were giggling like you were at a bachelorette party." Lorelei shook her head slowly, eyes filling with disappointment. "Oh, sweetheart, what have you done?" Myra's panic surged. She lifted her chin, clinging to her story like debris in a storm. "You can't deny a pregnancy just because I took a sip of wine." "No," I said gently, "but I can deny it because of what happened 10 minutes ago." I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out the very thing I had quietly picked up inside Myra's purse, left open carelessly on a chair. And from it I removed the small, crumpled cardboard box she'd forgotten to hide. A box labeled, Early Response Pregnancy Tests, -X3. I placed it on the table. Silence. A crushing, suffocating silence. Rowan stared at the tests as if they were burning holes into his reality. Myra, tell me this isn't what it looks like. Myra didn't answer, because there was nothing left for her to say, and nothing left for any of them to believe. What explosive confrontation followed the reveal, and why did Myra's own parents turn on her harder than anyone else? There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow, it stops. The kind of silence that filled my terrace after those pregnancy tests hit the table was not silence at all. It was the collapse of an entire facade, the shattering of illusions, the detonation of a truth everyone felt but no one wanted to name. Rowan looked at Myra the way a man looks at a stranger wearing the face of someone he once loved. Lorelai's eyes brimmed with tears, not the elegant kind, but the stunned, helpless kind that come from realizing you failed to see your own child clearly. And Caspian. Caspian was turning a shade of red I had only ever seen in thermometers. He snatched the empty wine glass from the table and held it up like evidence in a trial. You had 3 of these, he roared at his daughter. 3. I didn't, Myra cried, voice shaking. Dad, listen. I am listening, he thundered. And all I hear is the sound of you weaving lies like a spider on fire. Lorelai burst into sobs. Myra, honey, why would you lie about a baby? About something that's sacred? Myra backed away from them both, wild-eyed, hands up like they were pointing weapons at her. I had no choice, she shouted. You all turned against me. Lyra humiliated me in front of my husband. Orion is pretending he owns the house, and you, she pointed at her parents. You chose her over me. Her voice cracked, desperation dripping from every word. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, neither of you ever. Caspian slammed his fist onto the table so hard a spoon jumped. Pressure. Pressure, he repeated, incredulous. You stole $180,000 from us. He jabbed a finger toward the documents. And now you lie about a child to save yourself. Have you no shame, Myra? Not a shred. Myra's lips trembled, but her eyes hardened, dangerous, frantic. I did it for us, she said, turning sharply toward Rowan. For our future, for appearances. Because your salary, Rowan cut her off, voice hollow. My salary, my salary. He laughed, short, dark, humorless. We live in my mother's house, drive a financed car, and somehow you were flying to resorts and buying designer dresses every month. I should have asked where the money was coming from. Yes, I murmured with gentle finality. You should have. Myra spun toward me, fury twisting her features. This is your fault, she shrieked. You did this. You've been trying to ruin me from the start. No, I said softly. I simply stopped letting you ruin me. That was when Lorelai stood up, slowly, with the steadiness of someone who had finally crossed from denial into clarity. Myra, she said through tears, you need help. Help, Myra laughed bitterly. I need a mother who takes my side. Instead you're siding with strangers. We're siding with truth, Lorelai whispered. With decency, something you lost along the way. Caspian grabbed his daughter's arm, not roughly, just firmly enough to break whatever illusion she was clinging to. We're leaving, he said, voice low with disappointment. Gather your things, you will not stay another hour under this roof. Myra tore her arm from his grip. No, she hissed. I'm not leaving. This is my house whether any of you like it or not. It isn't, Orion finally said, stepping forward with an ease that made the rest of us seem frozen. And I'm losing my patience. Myra went still. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. And then Rowan, my son who had been silent too long, finally found his voice. Myra, he said quietly, I'm done, I'm filing for divorce. Those were the 6 words that finished her. She staggered back as if someone had kicked her legs out from under her. Her mouth opened but no sound came out for the first time since I'd met her. Lorelai reached for her daughter. Myra slapped her hand away. You'll regret this, she hissed at all of us. Every single one of you. But for once, her threats carried no power. Because the truth had already done what no one else could. It took away Myra's favorite weapon, control. What happened after Myra was forced out? And how did Orion and I turn this chaotic night into the most empowering decision of my later life? You'd think that after a confrontation like that, after lies collapsing and truths exploding across my terrace like fireworks gone wrong, the final act would be dramatic. A shouting match, a thrown glass, a physical struggle. But no, the end came quietly. Caspian, still red-faced with fury, took Myra by the elbow with the tired determination of a man who has finally admitted the truth about his own child. Lorelai gathered her purse with trembling hands, stopping only once to murmur to Rowan. Son. I'm so sorry. Rowan nodded, hollow, broken, but strangely calm, like someone who had just woken from a long fever dream. Myra, however, didn't go gently. She resisted, muttering curses under her breath, hissing threats at Rowan, at her parents, at me. But the fight had gone out of her punches. Her words were just noise now, noise that no longer carried the power to wound. They vanished through my gate like a storm finally pushed out to sea. Then there was nothing. Just the four of us remaining on the terrace, Rowan, Calder, Orion, and me. My son stood at the railing, shoulders slumped, staring at the ocean with unfocused eyes. "Mom, I've messed up everything," he whispered. I placed a hand on his shoulder, not to comfort but to anchor him. "No," I said softly. "You finally started seeing. That's not failure, that's growth." He leaned into my hand like he used to as a boy. "Can I stay here tonight?" he asked. A few months earlier, I would have said yes without hesitation, would have cooked him dinner, made up the guest bed, found excuses for his behavior. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "Not tonight," I said gently but firmly. "This house needs to be quiet for a while, and so do you." He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me he finally understood. He hugged me, really hugged me, the way he hadn't in years, and then he left, shoulders straighter than when he'd arrived. When the gate clicked shut behind him, the silence that fell wasn't heavy, it was healing. Calder cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, that was a show, should have sold tickets." Orion chuckled, but his gaze stayed on me. "You handled that like a general. I've seen CEOs crumble under less." I breathed in the salty air. The garden rustled softly. For the first time in forever, I felt the house breathing with me, not against me. "Now," Orion said, dusting off his hands, "we finalize the paperwork. I'll have the funds transferred back and no," I said, Calder startled. "No," I turned to Orion. "I want the house back." His eyebrows rose, amused and intrigued. "Lyra Hale is full of surprises," he murmured. "I never wanted to sell it," I admitted. "I sold the idea of selling for them, for Rowan, for my own freedom. But this house, this is my anchor." I expected resistance, litigation, at the very least, irritation. Instead, Orion smirked like a man who had enjoyed every second of the chaos. "You want to reverse the deal?" "I do. And you'll pay the penalty." "Gladly." He studied me for a moment, then extended his hand. "Done, just like that." Calder sagged with relief, probably already dreaming of the commission he'd keep. Orion leaned closer and added quietly, "You know, I've dealt with thousands of property owners. Only a handful know the difference between letting go of pain and letting go of what matters. You're one of the rare ones." I didn't blush, but I did look away because sometimes compliments hit harder than insults. The sun had dipped low by then, painting the terrace in copper. I took another long breath. For the first time in years, I felt something warm inside me. Not pride, not victory, freedom, real freedom. And I had one more decision to make. What to do with the life that had suddenly, unexpectedly, become my own again. What happened when Rowan called me later that night? And how did I decide to step into the next chapter of my life, starting with a single plane ticket? The house was almost too quiet once everyone left. There were no clinking glasses, no sharp whispers, no false laughter reverberating through the hallways like brittle wind chimes. Just the soft hum of the ocean outside and the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. A silence I'd nearly forgotten the sound of. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the same tea Myra always complained smelled old. I don't know why that thought crossed my mind right then, but it made me smile in a way that surprised me. A small, private smile just for myself. I'd barely taken a sip when my phone lit up. Rowan. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen. A reflex, I suppose, years of answering immediately, years of mothering without pause. But I let it ring twice before I picked up. A small deviation from habit, but symbolic nonetheless. "Mom," his voice was raw, strained. Are you awake?" "I am," a shaky breath. I didn't know where else to go. I sat in my car for over an hour trying to understand everything. His voice cracked, and the boy he used to be peeked through the man he'd grown into. "Myra said things about you," he whispered. "Things I believed. I'm ashamed of that." I leaned against the counter, letting his words settle without rushing to soften them. I'd spent years cushioning every blow, making excuses for him, for everyone. Tonight I allowed the truth to stand on its own legs. "I know," I said. "But believing lies doesn't make you cruel, Rowan. Refusing to see truth does, and you've stopped refusing." He didn't respond immediately, and when he did, his voice was barely audible. "I don't know who I am without her." The honesty of it hit me harder than any accusation ever had. "Then this," I said gently, "is your chance to find out." A long silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt necessary, like air being cleared. "Mom, are you mad at me?" "No," I said, "not anymore." "Do you still love me?" "Always, but love doesn't mean standing still so someone else can lean on you forever." He exhaled a long, shuddering release. "What do I do now?" "You heal," I said. You sit with the discomfort, you take responsibility, and you rebuild yourself not for someone else this time but for you. Another silence, then softly, "Will you help me?" This time my answer was immediate. "Yes, but I won't carry you, Rowan, not again. You walk and I'll walk beside you." He whispered, "Thank you," and for the first time in years it sounded like gratitude instead of dependency. After we hung up, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the moonlit tiles of my kitchen floor. That call, soft, painful, honest, felt like the true end of something. Not a door slammed in anger, but a door gently closing with clarity. And the moment it closed, I felt another one open somewhere inside me. A quiet shift. A question I had ignored for too long. If my life was my own again, what did I want to do with it? I walked to my study drawer and pulled out an old leather folder, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were brochures, dog-eared pages, and a map marked with circles in ink that had faded into soft, hopeful ghosts. Places I'd always wanted to visit. Countries I postponed. Trips I canceled for everyone else's comfort. I smoothed the pages with my fingers, then I opened my laptop, and I booked a plane ticket. One way, no hesitation. The destination? Somewhere I had once dreamed of but never dared to go. Somewhere far enough away that I could finally hear myself think. Somewhere that felt like a beginning. What did I discover on that journey? And how did a single unexpected message months later bring my story full circle in a way none of us saw coming? I landed in Santorini, a quiet coastal village in southern Europe where the buildings were sun-worn and the sea always smelled of salt and secrets. It wasn't a bustling tourist city or one of those postcard places plastered on travel guides. No, Santorini was gentler, untouched, almost shy. I chose it precisely because no one there would know my history, my heartbreaks, my mistakes, my son, my daughter-in-law's chaos, my house and its terrace that once held too much noise. I rented a small stone cottage perched on a cliff, its windows open to the sea. In the mornings, fishermen called out greetings as they untangled their nets. In the evenings, an older woman named Yara sat outside her blue door humming old folk songs while shelling peas. And for the first time in decades, I lived quietly. I woke when I wanted, ate when I wanted, walked until my feet ached, sat by the water until the sun dipped into the sea, and wrote letters to no one in particular, letters I never sent. People assume healing is explosive, like a dramatic breakthrough. It is. Healing is slow, a steady drip, a long exhale, a soft place to collapse until strength returns. I learned the comfort of solitude, the luxury of choosing myself, the beauty of not being needed for a while. Some days I missed Rowan fiercely. Other days I didn't miss anyone at all. 3 months passed that way. Then one morning, just as I finished my walk down to the harbor and bought figs from a vendor who always insisted on overfilling my bag, my phone buzzed. A message from Rowan. I froze, not out of fear but because the past and the present suddenly collided, like two waves meeting offshore. I stood near the seawall, opened the message, and read, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything, truly. I'm working on myself, therapy, finances, accountability, and I wanted you to know," my breath caught. "The divorce is finalized." I exhaled, long and slow, as if the last tether between past pain and present peace had finally loosened. Then another message appeared. "I'm coming to see you. I don't want to rebuild our old relationship. I want to build a new one with honesty this time." I sat on a nearby bench as gulls circled overhead, their calls echoing the strange emotion rising in me. I had waited years for my son to find clarity, and in the most unexpected corner of the world he finally had. He wasn't asking me to rescue him, he wasn't drowning anymore, he was swimming on his own. And then, because life has a sense of humor, another message popped up, this one from an unknown number. "Lyra Hale Orion Cross here, I'm in Europe for a conference, passing through Santorini in a week. Coffee." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My old life knocking. My new life inviting, and me sitting in the space between. I didn't know yet what I wanted with Orion: friendship, curiosity, closure, or something else entirely. But I knew this: I wasn't the woman who allowed others to define her anymore. I typed 2 short words: "Why not?" When I walked back to my cottage, the sea wind wrapped around me like an embrace. The world felt wide again, possible again. And as I closed the weather-worn door behind me, I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was simply the first chapter I had written for myself, without guilt, without fear, and without anyone else holding the pen.